From the WACH Fox studios, this is On Point on WACH Fox with Cynthia Hardy.
They're trying to change who can vote. So this is not just about another election. This is about our rights.
Good morning. Welcome to On Point on WACH Fox. That was a part of an interview that we'll bring you today that we did with Reverend Al Sharpton when he was here recently for National Voter Registration Day. It is a pleasure always to bring you the show, and we always like to invite you to tune into the radio show On Point with Cynthia Hardy, heard every Sunday evening, 6 p.m. on 101.3 The Big DM. Today on Point on WACH, political issues and the November 6th general election. In about 5 weeks, voters across the country will go to the polls to elect a president, federal, state, and local lawmakers, and to decide key issues. Now, during a visit to Columbia Tuesday, the Reverend Al Sharpton spoke out against voter ID laws like the one passed in South Carolina last year. Now, the closing arguments were heard in Washington, D.C. Monday before a federal panel of judges to decide whether or not the Justice Department's decision not to enforce the law will be reversed in South Carolina. But what about some of the other things on the minds of voters, like women's issues or immigration? Today on Point on WACH, we will continue our political focus as we look at key issues on the minds of voters and on the way to election 2012. My favorite anchor here at WACH Fox, no secret, Brian McConkey.
And
you're joining us here again this week. Thank you, Brian, for being here with us. We want to keep the focus on political stuff between now and November 6th because the stakes are really high.
Yeah, well, we're less than 40 days away from people heading to the polls now. And you mentioned voter ID in the open there. We did a whole show on that last week just to let people know that, yes, it's a law, but no, it's not in effect. But there's so many other things that we have to discuss as well. So hopefully we cleared some of that up last week.
Hopefully
and answered some questions. And if not, we can continue to do so in the weeks to come. But a lot of issues on the table. And now people are paying attention. The conventions are well in the books now, and the debates are beginning. And they're out there on the campaign trail. So everybody, whether they're casual observers or the real inside baseball type political people, they're paying attention. They're paying attention.
Well, you know, one of the issues in the state, of course, is we're red. We're pretty much a Republican state.
There's any secret there.
No secret there.
It's not going to change, I don't think.
But you're seeing a lot of people on the other side coming through the state, a lot of surrogates, trying to drum up a lot of support and get people to the polls. And one of the people that came last week was, of course, Reverend Al Sharpton. And he came and stomped through the state a little bit. And Mark Boone and I, welcome back, Mark.
Thank you.
We call you an on-point contributor because Mark Boone has been a part of us since the very, very beginning. And Mark and I went out there and did a little bit of field work and even did an interview with Congressman Jim Clyburn that we thought was pretty good.
That's right. In fact, Congressman Clyburn actually brought it home to us and pointed out that this is not just about this particular election, that the voter ID laws that we're talking about is something that goes to the rights of all people to vote.
And I think we ought to just go ahead and go to that bite right now so we can kind of take a listen to what Congressman Clyburn had to say.
If you fail to exercise that vote, you will find your rights curtailed. You will find this governmental process shut off for you and from you.
It's really interesting because I asked him the question because oftentimes when you hear about voter ID, we think about it along racial lines. So I asked Congressman Clyburn about the generic nature of the issue itself and whether or not he felt as if South Carolinians in general stood a chance of being disenfranchised, and of course that's the result we got.
That is, and Congressman Clyburn has a point in that when we're talking about the right to vote, that's our fundamental right in this country. More than any other right that we have is our right to vote. And so it's very appropriate that he would bring up that issue. On the other side, you have people saying, well, doesn't voter ID actually legitimize the vote?
Actually protect it.
And it protects it, absolutely. So that's something that you're hearing both sides at this point. But Congressman Clyburn does hit home the fact that our right to vote is something that is very precious to all of us.
And I think both sides of the argument have very valid points, protecting the integrity. And those people are saying, well, some of the folks, they don't have access to an ID. They just don't. The elderly, some segments of the population, they don't.
You know, and that issue of voter ID is going to be one of the campaign issues, unfortunately, as we head to the general election. And I say unfortunately because while it is an issue, and oftentimes people do refer to it as a suppressive effort, because if you make anybody feel as if they cannot get to the polls or they will not be welcome to go and cast a vote, then they would be less likely to go because they'd be embarrassed and not want to have to deal with that kind of scrutiny necessarily. At the same time, in other parts of the country, some of the laws are being upheld and some of them are being stricken.
They are. In Texas, they had their issue there with their ID law. But you know, one of the things that keeps coming up is whether or not the voters are enthusiastic enough to come out. On the right-hand side, you've got people who are saying that the core constituency that Obama had last election is not as happy with him this time. And they're actually counting on less people coming out for Obama. And they're also pointing to the voter ID laws that are being passed, and they're saying that's also going to have an impact. I believe that they're wrong. I believe that voter turnout is going to be just as big this year, especially on the Democrat side, as it was before. On the other side, you got Romney, who, for all intents and purposes, a lot of people aren't as enthusiastic about him. So it could come out to, or it could come down to voter turnout this year as to whether or not Obama's elected or not.
And there's still some folks out there that think South Carolina could change from red to blue.
It's a hard task.
I know it's a hard task and a very unpopular thing to say, but I have heard it said in circles.
Well, Cynthia, I would say that the chance of that versus Snowball in Hades is pretty slim. But let's look at the facts, though. There are other important races in South Carolina, other important initiatives. We got the school bus, or the city bus, the tax, the penny tax.
For Columbia, yeah.
We've got
a lot of them. We're going to talk about when we come back.
Yes.
One of them is women's issues.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about what's on the mind of female voters, as well as some of what Mark was saying. But you're going to hear from USC's Director of Women and Gender Studies, Dr. Drusilla Barker, when we come back. Stay with us.
You're watching On Point on WACH Fox with Cynthia Hardy on Columbia's own WACH Fox.
Welcome back to On Point on WACH Fox, political issues in the November 6th general election. We've got Drusilla Barker, who is Professor of Women and Gender Studies at the university. Actually, you're the department head. Dr. Barker, thank you for being with us today.
It's my pleasure, Cynthia.
We are interested in the issues that are interesting to women when it comes to this election. You say what to that?
Well, I say there are several issues that are extremely important. Reproductive rights are extremely important. After school daycare is extremely important. 2/3 of the elderly people in this country are women.
Really, I didn't know that.
And so the cuts that are being proposed in the Romney-Ryan agenda, they're austerity cuts. They will disproportionately affect women. We know this from history. We know this from what happened in Brazil, what happened in Africa, what happened in any parts of the world where we had, in those days it was called structural adjustment. It is exactly the same thing, cutting back on government spending, giving tax breaks to the wealthy, et cetera, et cetera. These things have a disproportionate impact on most women. Now, some women benefit. Which women benefit? Wealthy women benefit if they are married to wealthy men, or if they have wealth in their families and so they're independently wealthy. But for poor women, for working class women, and for middle class women, the Romney-Ryan budget, or what I would like to call the Republican agenda, really is a war on women.
Wow.
We've heard that before, especially when it comes to reproductive rights. We've heard the battle over that for years. That's not anything new, but has it been intensified at all, maybe during this cycle?
Yes, it has been intensified, and usually the comeback is, well, women don't care about reproductive rights, they care about having good jobs. Women are not going to have good jobs if they don't have access to being able to plan their own families, number one. And so birth control is extremely important to women succeeding in the labor force, and all the statistics show that. Secondly, the anti-abortion rhetoric that is often couched around late-term abortion can endanger women's lives. Many of the laws that are being proposed would allow a woman to die rather than to have an abortion. And I think that it's wrong.
When you talk about whether or not women will come out in large numbers for this election, do you have any indication of that, Dr. Barker?
I don't. I'm not a political scientist. I'm an economist by training. However, I think if women understand the importance, and I think particularly if working class women understand the importance, and if we could figure out a way to make time in their very busy lives, because poor women are poor not just in money, they're poor in time. And so I would love to see some arrangements made for, I'll take care of your kids while you go to vote.
Gotcha. You know, Reverend Al Sharpton is a very controversial figure. Some people care about what Reverend Al says, some people don't. We did ask him.
But everyone listens.
Yeah, most people do
whether they
listen
care
to
or
him,
not, they're
for
still
one
listening.
reason or another. But we did ask him when he was in town about issues that were important to women, and we want to tell you what he had to say.
I mean, how could women sit by and not be outraged when you're talking about violating women's choice over their own bodies, whatever that choice may be? And then you're running against a president who the first thing he signed was the Lilly Ledbetter Act against women being discriminated against. So I think it's a clear-cut issue of women's rights and women being respected.
Mark, you say what to that as a man?
Well, first of all, let's go back a few seconds ago. Women are going to come out for this election, and I believe they're going to be strong on both sides. Here's an election where I think the Democrats are making a huge mistake if they think that they can couch this on the back of reproductive rights. I think that if Democrats believe that they're going to win simply by trotting out abortion as the key issue, they'll never win that.
He's saying women are smarter than that.
I
Absolutely.
completely agree. Women are smarter than that. I would couch this in terms of the Lilly Ledbetter Pay Act. 77 cents for every dollar. That's got to change. I would like to see more subsidies for child care. I would like to see more help for women who, particularly for single moms, that is the largest growing family type, not only in the United States, but all over the world, really, are single mother families. And you know what? These women need help. And I think if the Democrats were smart, they'd be playing on these issues what is really important to women, because women's families are important to them, and providing for their families are important, and they do need, it does take a village.
That's going to be it. Thank you so much, Dr. Drusilla Barker.
And Mark, the big
and
return.
Mark Boone as well. Thank you so much for your
Thank you.
return. We come back in the presidential election. Both candidates are vying for the Hispanic vote. So what matters most to that voting bloc? Roberto Beelan weighs in when we come back.
You're watching On Point on WACH Fox with Cynthia Hardy on Columbia's own WACH Fox.
Welcome back to On Point on WACH Fox. Brian McConkie and I are continuing our focus on politics and issues, key issues on the minds of voters coming up
November
toward
6th is coming.
It's right around
And
the corner,
coming
5
fast.
weeks away. And of course, Dr. Drusilla Barker is still with us from the Women and Gender Study at USC. Roberto Beelan joins us with the South Carolina Hispanic Council. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
You know, what issues are on the mind of the Hispanic population?
Well, people think that the immigration will be the number one issue. It's an important one, but not the most important one for most of the Hispanics, because you have to remember that only 1 in 6 is actually with documents problems and immigration issues.
So you're saying to me that only 1 in 6 members of the Hispanic community are having issues with documentation?
Yeah, between 1 in 6, 1 in 5. So
Stereotypically, people think something a little different.
They would say
than
5
that.
and 6 probably. I would 5 out of 6. They
Probably.
would. Yeah, you would think that most
Right.
people would.
So we have the same issues of everybody
Yeah.
else: jobs, proper housing, better opportunities. Not the immigration. Immigration is important, and don't take me wrong, but not the main issue.
Yeah. You got to pay the bills.
Pay the bills.
And that is on the minds of everybody, especially in this state where we still have one of the higher unemployment rates in this country.
That's very
still
true.
in the top 7 or so.
That's very true. Very true. When it comes to the economy, how has the Hispanic community been hardest hit, and what are you expecting from candidates?
Well, I'm expecting equal opportunity for equal outcome, just to have a chance to make a living in this country, and many times we're not giving a chance, and I'm talking about education and just a fair way of dealing with our population. And we just want someone that can think about us as a group that can make a change in society. And we are probably dismissed as people that we are depending on the government and trying to get a handout, and we're not.
It's interesting, Brian, because as Roberto talks about the fact that a number of people think about the Hispanic community wanting a handout. On the other hand, the other stereotype that you all enjoy, I say enjoy, because I think it's really great when somebody says you have an excellent work ethic, and you know they say that about you
Well,
guys.
we show up to work. That's a fact.
Roberto, when it comes to support for President Obama or support for his challenger, Mitt Romney, it depends from state to state. South Carolina, Hispanics in South Carolina, you expect them to lean Republican?
Well, let me tell you one thing. Hispanics are about 9% of the electoral vote, overall, and only about 26% are favoring the GOP. So
really?
And we know that for statistics and
why?
Well, it's just the public policies of the Democratic Party are more favorable to the Hispanics.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a fact. It's a fact of life. But the other point that I want to make is that the Hispanic vote in this election cycle is going to be vital for the candidate to gain the White House. I mean, there's no way they can make it to the White House without a good representation of the Hispanic vote.
Brian, in chatting with Roberto earlier and before the show, during the pre-interview, he shared with me that in the state of Florida, 25% of the population is of Hispanic descent, whether it's Cuban or Puerto Rican or Mexican descent. You basically have 25% of the population.
Well, that's
Hispanic.
Texas. Texas is 25%.
What about Florida?
Florida is about 17%.
17%. Even still,
a high percentage.
It's a very,
Yeah, it's a
very,
very high
large voting
percentage.
bloc. And in states like that, particularly states like Florida, where Mitt Romney and Barack Obama are battling it out, you guys could very easily be a bloc that has a lot to say about the outcome.
Well, the big prize here is Florida with 29 electoral votes, and it's nobody's. Any of the two candidates can actually get Florida. It's a battleground right now. But Florida has changed, and the Cuban majority that used to be in the past with the Hispanic bloc is not longer there. There is a large representation of other countries of Hispanic origin, and things are changing. So Marco Rubio is actually trying very hard to gather support for the GOP, but I don't see the Hispanics voting like they used to be in the past for the GOP. I believe that the Hispanic bloc in Florida will be leaning more blue this time.
Mm-hmm. And Drusilla, do you have an opportunity to look at issues, women's issues within the Hispanic community?
I certainly do, particularly within the Latina community here in Colombia. And there are two huge issues facing Latina women. One is access to good prenatal care, and that's a big issue. And then the second big issue is because of fear of not having proper documentation, domestic violence,
Gotcha.
and not having access to what to do if they are experienced domestic violence. And
You get the last comment as we get ready to go to break.
Well, this election cycle, there's so much riding on this. The future of this country and the well-being of so many people are riding on this. And I just want to encourage every single Hispanic that have the right to vote to go out and vote, because they have to show up in order to make a difference. I'm not telling them which way to vote, but just do it. It's a right that we have to do it.
Thank you, Roberto Beelan. Thank you, Dr. Drusilla Barker. When we come back, we're going to shift gears a bit to tell you about a fundraiser that can really help out here in the
Raise some
Midlands.
awareness.
And a great organization, AKAs, are here. Stay with us.
You're watching On Point on WACH Fox with Cynthia Hardy on Columbia's own WACH Fox.
Welcome back to On Point on Watch Fox. Brian McConkey and I. We've had a great show so far.
We had another spirited discussion about issues leading up to the November election. We're going to shift it around a little bit now and focus on a different part of the community now.
We've got our friends here from AKA, and they want to talk about an upcoming event that's really important. Kimberly Butler Willis is the publicity chairperson for the Upsilon Omega Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha. And along with her from the HIV/AIDS Council is Kalea Sumter from the South Carolina HIV/AIDS Council. Welcome, ladies, to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Talk to us, if you will, about your upcoming event and why it's important that people know what you're doing.
Well, Upsilon Omega Omega is a chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and we were built to empower black women and young girls in order to empower the black family and thereby empowering the black community. So with that, we design programs that are for women by women. And this year we're having our Still Standing Survivors Luncheon with the primary focus on HIV/AIDS. We know that black women in the Midlands and black women nationally and internationally are disproportionately affected by HIV and AIDS. So we are really bringing the spotlight on it here in the Midlands, and with those proceeds, we want to give back to the South Carolina HIV/AIDS Council.
Brian, I can see why Kimberly is the publicity chair for her sorority.
Yes, she knows how to tell us all about the event very
absolutely,
well.
Absolutely.
When we hear about the event you're talking about here, HIV and AIDS, we hear the numbers all the time about how poorly we do in this state. And Kalea, from your standpoint, where does it start? Where do we change that? Is it education? Do people not understand the issue entirely?
Definitely, it's education. Our focus is prevention. Preventing HIV/AIDS is a preventable disease. And if we can educate people and educate them on how to prevent these things, then ultimately we will reduce the numbers in South Carolina.
You know, you are with the HIV/AIDS Council, but you're also a member of the sorority. And so which makes it kind of nice to have somebody working there that actually understands. Because AKA has chapters all around the country, and you guys your intent is to improve the quality of life in a number of areas. How does your event fit with that, Kimberly?
One of our primary areas is health. Outside of economic empowerment for women, health is a very big issue. We know that black women are disproportionately affected by a large number of health concerns. The very first year of the event, Still Standing Survivors Luncheon, we did a focus on breast cancer. And then the second year, we did a focus on domestic violence. And our participants have really been growing. We started off with 80. The second year, we went up to 175. So this year, we are going for a big goal of 250. So we encourage everybody to come out. The event is on October 13th at the Brooklyn Baptist Convention Center.
That's really nice. When we talk to people about where the numbers are increasing, people are surprised to find out that among older African American women, the numbers are going up. The 50 and older crowd, those numbers are going up kind of high, aren't they, Kalea?
Yes, they are actually increasing. A lot of people have the misconception that older Americans don't engage in the same things as the younger ones do, and they certainly do. And they think that they're not at risk because of their age. So we're definitely trying to target that age group as well.
When you on the night of the event, what will we be in store for if we come?
Oh, a great program. The event actually starts at 10:30 a.m. because it's a luncheon, and we hope to get you guys out there by 2. Although many of you would want to stay. We have a speaker, Ms. Deidre Malloy, and she also works for the South Carolina HIV/AIDS Council, and she's going to share her story. She's so touching, she's so moving, and she's definitely an example of a survivor. She is a survivor, and this luncheon is not just to harp on the hardships, but to celebrate life and love and support in a community. So it's not limited to just African American women, but we encourage all women to come out.
It's been interesting, hasn't it, Brian, to see how people over the years have been living with HIV.
Yeah,
because
it's no longer a death sentence. It was at one point, and if you can go the course and are able to have access to something like proper treatment, you can live a long, productive life. We've seen such advances.
And I'm sure that's your message too. Final comment from you ladies, and we'll start with you, Kalea.
I would just like everyone to come out and support the Alpha Kappa Alpha chapter with this wonderful event. It is for celebration of life. We don't want to think of HIV as this just horrible thing. We want to think about life and encouraging people to live.
Well, we commend you guys.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's it for this edition of On Point on Watch Fox. We do want you to send your comments and suggestions to onpointwithcynthia.com or go to the Facebook page. Leave your comments there. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Talk and like us on Facebook at On Point with Cynthia Hardy. You've been following me on Twitter, and I've been following
Yes, I have.
you too.
You've been very active.
Yeah, I've been very active. I like it.
Been very active.
We really appreciate you guys watching. So thank you. We do believe that when you're informed, you're empowered. Once empowered, you guys, we are on point. We're going to see you next week.